The dark side of Rwanda's economic miracle. This was what Rwanda looked like in 1994, and this is what Rwanda looks like today. Just a couple of decades ago, Rwanda was destroyed by a genocide that led to the death of over 800,000 people. The country was in abject poverty, with the average Rwandan unable to afford a meal. In fact, Rwanda was the worst country in the world and could be equated to hell on earth. Fast forward to 20 years later, Rwanda has been completely transformed to having the fastest growing economy in the world, good infrastructures, booming tourism industry, and its capital city Kigali has been the cleanest and one of the most visited cities in Africa more than a decade. Today, Rwanda is a completely new country with lots of praise from the international community on how desirable the country has become. But all this growth came with a price which, if care is not taken, will plunge the country into another civil war. You see, for us to understand both the economic and political situation in modern-day Rwanda, we need to go back memory lane and establish a few facts. Rwanda was originally inhabited by the Twa, a Pygmy people who still live in Rwanda today, but beginning in the 11th century, the Hutu people migrated to the region from the west and south, followed by the Tutsi people in the 14th and 15th centuries. For much of its history, the Kingdom of Rwanda was a relatively homogeneous society with a shared cultural and linguistic heritage. However, in the late 19th century, Rwanda was colonized by Germany and later by Belgium. The colonial powers introduced a system of ethnic identification, dividing the population into two main groups: the Hutu, who made up the majority of the population and were largely farmers, and the Tutsi, who were a minority but held most of the political and economic power. So you were either identified as a Hutu or Tutsi instead of just being a Rwandan. This started causing minor tension between the two ethnic groups. The first war between the Tutsi and Hutu in Rwanda took place in 1959 to 1962, following a period of political unrest and social tensions. At the time, Rwanda was still under colonial rule, with power held by a Tutsi monarchy that was supported by the colonial authorities. However, a growing number of Hutu leaders were calling for greater political representation and an end to Tutsi domination. In 1959, violence erupted between the Hutu and Tutsi communities, sparked by rumors that the Tutsi were planning to massacre the Hutu. The violence quickly spread, and many Tutsi were killed or forced to flee the country. The monarchy was overthrown, and a Hutu-led government was established. This period of violence and political upheaval lasted for several years, with periodic outbreaks of violence between the two communities. In 1962, Rwanda gained independence from Belgium, and a new government was established. After the establishment of the new government, led by the country's first president Gregoire Kayibanda, political tensions between the Hutu and Tutsi communities continued to simmer, and periodic outbreaks of violence occurred. In 1994, the country was plunged into a brutal genocide, in which an estimated 800,000 people were killed in just 100 days. Besides the ethnic tension that had already started what sparked the genocide, the shooting down of Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana's plane on April 6, 1994, was a key trigger for the genocide that followed. At the time, President Habyarimana was returning to Rwanda from Tanzania, where he had been attending peace talks with a Tutsi-led rebel group. The plane was hit by a missile as it approached the airport in the Rwandan capital, Kigali, and crashed, killing everyone on board, including Habyarimana and the president of Burundi, Cyprien Ntaryamira. The shooting down of the plane was a pivotal moment in Rwandan history and was followed by a wave of violence and bloodshed that lasted for 100 days and claimed the lives of an estimated 800,000 people. The genocide was characterized by brutal attacks on Tutsi civilians and moderate Hutus and was carried out by government forces, Hutu militias, and ordinary citizens using machetes, clubs, and other crude weapons. Following the genocide, a new government was established, led by President Paul Kagame. When Paul Kagame became president of Rwanda in 2000, he inherited a country that was still recovering from the devastating genocide that had taken place just 6 years earlier. Kagame faced significant challenges in terms of rebuilding the country, promoting reconciliation and unity between the Hutu and Tutsi communities, and establishing a stable and prosperous nation. He immediately began implementing several policies aimed at rebuilding the country and promoting development and reconciliation. The first thing he did was to put the Vision 2020, which was aimed at bringing the country to emergence in 20 years. Some of the key policies he implemented include: 1. Promoting national unity. Kagame established a National Unity and Reconciliation Commission, which was tasked with promoting reconciliation between the Hutu and Tutsi communities. He also implemented policies aimed at promoting social cohesion, such as the One Cow Per Family program, which provided cows to poor households as a means of reducing poverty and promoting unity. 2. Investing in education and healthcare. Knowing that the country didn't have any significant amount of natural resources, Kagame decided to invest in what it had, its people. He made significant investments in education and healthcare to improve the health and well-being of the population and promote human capital development. He expanded access to primary and secondary education and invested in healthcare infrastructure and services. Today, Rwanda has one of the highest literacy rates in Africa at about 85%. The life expected also moved from 42 in the 80s and 90s to 72. 3. Attracting foreign investment. Kagame implemented policies aimed at attracting foreign investment and promoting economic development. He established a one-stop investment center to streamline the investment process and implemented policies aimed at promoting entrepreneurship and innovation. 4. Combating corruption. Kagame took a strong stance against corruption, implementing measures to increase transparency and accountability in government. He established an independent anti-corruption agency and prosecuted officials who engaged in corrupt practices. 5. Strengthening the justice system. Kagame implemented reforms aimed at strengthening the justice system and promoting the rule of law. He established a new constitution and invested in judicial training and infrastructure to improve access to justice. 6. Building infrastructures. Paul Kagame invested significantly in infrastructure to rebuild Rwanda. He prioritized investments in roads, electricity, information and communication technologies, ICT, airports, and water and sanitation. Kagame's investments included the construction of new highways, expansion of the national grid, establishment of a national fiber optic network, construction of a new international airport, and construction of new water supply systems. These investments have contributed to Rwanda's economic growth and development and have helped the country become one of the fastest-growing economies in Africa. All these policies implemented by Paul Kagame set Rwanda on the path towards emergence. In the next couple of years, Rwanda witnessed an economic boom with steady economic growth. In the 2000s and 2010s, Rwanda's economy began to recover and experience strong growth. Between 2000 and 2019, the country's average annual growth rate was around 7.5%. In recent years, Rwanda's economy has continued to grow, with a growth rate of 8.4% in 2019. Rwanda is currently one of the most peaceful, innovative, and cleanest countries in Africa. Rwandan tourism has experienced significant growth in recent years. According to the Rwanda Development Board, the country welcomed a total of 1.7 million visitors in 2019, up from just 304,000 visitors in 2004. This represents an increase of over 450% in just 15 years. In terms of revenue, tourism has become Rwanda's largest foreign exchange earner. In 2019, the industry generated over $500 million in revenue, up from $62 million in 2000. This represents an increase of over 700% in just 19 years. However, all this came at a cost. The thing is, as the economy of Rwanda was booming, the standard of living of the average Rwandan remained almost the same. Under Paul Kagame's leadership, there have been allegations of political repression and human rights abuses in Rwanda. Critics argue that his government has suppressed political freedom and violated human rights in several ways. Kagame's government has been accused of cracking down on political opposition and dissent. Opposition leaders have been arrested or imprisoned, and some have been subjected to harassment and intimidation. The government has also been accused of restricting freedom of expression and assembly, and of targeting journalists and civil society activists who criticize the government. There have also been reports of extrajudicial killings and disappearances of government critics and opposition figures, with some of these cases linked to security forces or intelligence agencies. There have been allegations of torture and abuse of detainees in prisons and detention centers, with some detainees reportedly subjected to beatings, electric shocks, and other forms of physical and psychological abuse. Paul Kagame tried everything to build the country by causing a lot of harm to anyone who disagreed with his policies. His rule was not inclusive, and that affected about of Rwandans. Though the economy is growing, Rwanda remains one of the poorest countries in the world, with high levels of poverty and inequality. According to the World Bank, around 39% of the population lived below the poverty line in 2017. Poor Rwandans face several challenges that impact their daily lives. Many lack access to basic services such as healthcare, education, and clean water. Malnutrition is also a significant problem, particularly among children. In addition, poor Rwandans often live in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions, with limited access to affordable housing. Poverty also limits economic opportunities for many Rwandans. Most poor Rwandans work in the informal sector, which often consists of low-paying and unstable jobs. Many struggle to make ends meet and lack access to credit and other resources that could help them improve their economic situation. Despite these challenges, the Rwandan government has implemented policies aimed at reducing poverty and promoting economic development. These policies include investments in infrastructure, education, and healthcare, as well as efforts to promote small business development and expand social safety nets. The government has also implemented programs aimed at improving access to credit and other resources for poor Rwandans. Overall, while poverty remains a significant challenge for many Rwandans, the government's efforts to reduce poverty and promote economic development have had some success. However, there is still work to be done to ensure that all Rwandans have access to basic services and economic opportunities. To conclude, though Paul Kagame is being praised for transforming the country, critics still claim Rwanda is still run by a group of dictators who have held on to power. This has made Rwanda one of the worst countries to live in before its Human Development Index is still extremely low. They argue that Rwanda is just an overhyped country, and that the quality of life in the country does not live up to the hype. Due to his authoritarian regime, which has silenced a lot of people through the use of force, if care is not taken, Rwanda might plunge back into a civil when Paul Kagame eventually leaves office. Let us know your thoughts in the comment. Do you think Rwanda is a suitable country where people can relocate to and start a new life, or it is just an overhyped country that has nothing to offer? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching and subscribe to the channel for more.